Please welcome
and we are live for episode 3, the MCW Cast. I am Legacy MC of Maryland Championship Wrestling, Larry Legend.
I'm Dan McDevitt, co-owner of MCW Pro Wrestling.
And I'm Tara.
And we've got a very special guest in the house with us here, another Legacy MCW member, Mr. Kevin Eck.
I'm very happy to be here, guys. And girl.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you.
Yes, indeed we are. And hey, you know they say 3 is a magic number. We are rip-roaring through this brand new endeavor here at Maryland, or MCW Pro, and I think that things are going swimmingly. We've been getting so much great feedback from the fans, and we just want to say we appreciate everyone who tunes in every Tuesday at 8 across YouTube, Twitch, and our Facebook. And guys, don't forget the hashtag AskMCWCast.
Yep, just send out a tweet, ask MCW, hashtag AskMCWCast, and we'll be happy to answer your questions.
That's right. You know, and I don't think we actually mentioned, well, we probably have mentioned it, but we haven't mentioned it enough, our official Twitter handle, where you can ask MCW Cast. It's at MCW Cast 2021. So follow us on Twitter at MCW Cast 2021. We always put out media of our guests and, some behind-the-scenes footage. So definitely follow us on Twitter at MCW Cast 2021.
A lot of things to touch on, guys, from last week. What about the show with John Minidakis from Jimmy Santa's Seafood? I don't know if you guys saw this past week. They breached their $350,000. They passed $350,000 on the fund to help out Baltimore restaurants. Just, I mean, unbelievable.
Yep. They've actually adjusted the goal now to $500,000, and they are well on their way to meeting that. And I would expect them to do that here in the next week or so, probably, with the way things have been going.
Yeah, big shout out. I don't know if I've been following and watching John, all the restaurants that he's helping out. It's just amazing. But
what would be great too is he's getting a lot of media coverage for this now, and it's not just local anymore; it's national. And what would be great is to see this happening in cities that are hit so hard by this pandemic all across the country. So, I think that he's starting a movement. Maybe he didn't intend to start a movement when he embarked on this, just helping out some local establishments that have been hit hard. But now, can we see this as a pay it forward thing? And, I'm hoping we see it trickling down across the country.
Well, it says, there's an old saying, each one to teach one. And, a huge shout out to all of Baltimore that, contributed to such a worthy cause. We've got a cause going on right here at the MCW Cast. It's called Buy Me a Coffee. All right.
Absolutely.
And as always, we're very proud of Johnny and Jimmy's meeting that goal to help out the Baltimore restaurants. But we also want to give a huge shout out to all of our fans out there that bought us a cup of coffee and are keeping us nice and warm here in the studio.
Especially in this weather.
Yes, definitely. That's right. So special shout out thanks to Daryl, Dr. D. Thanks for the contribution.
I love the doctor.
Yep, Mo and Lisa, longtime fans. Thank you for your support. Dan Garrett sent a toast for the Bruiser. Thanks for that, Dan.
Right on.
Our very own Danny Mays sent a couple cups of coffee our way.
MCW ring announcer,
There
Danny
you go.
Mays.
That's right.
Another legacy MCW.
There you go. That's right.
Even our own Ken Dixon threw some coffees our way. I know he's probably popping open a cold one, and he said so much in his comment, but we appreciate the coffee for us. And last one to shout out is, I only have their handle name. It's Satabuno.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll take it.
So, but thank you. We appreciate it nonetheless. We're enjoying the coffee, so thank you so much for supporting us.
Absolutely. And there was a lot of support going around. I feel like support is the idea right now in the country. Just this past weekend, our first guest, Leo Rush, had an exciting match to kick off a 24-hour telethon by the folks over at GCW called Fight Forever. And we all want to extend Leo a congratulations because he defeated his opposition, Blake Christian, all heart. And it was a fantastic match. I want to shout out, it was the best 2 out of 3 falls match. Leo, since coming back to the Indies, had already accumulated quite a few losses. And I remember I spoke to him and he was like, Larry, I love these matches. I love getting my name back out there, but everyone's beating me. Joey Janela beat me. ACH beat me. He's talking about all these losses. And Blake Christian was one of the competitors that beat him 2 times now. So it was the best 2 out of 3 falls match, and Leo got his wins back, essentially. And he beat Blake Christian 2 straight falls. Guys, the last fall, Leo put Blake in the bruised mission. and he was portraying his character, the Blackheart, Lio Rush, which is kind of like an Undertaker kind of take on what he has to offer. And it was one of those moments where you see the image of him. He had this great makeup on. He had these black contacts in, and he's in a casket, and he's giving the bruise mission to his opponent. And I knew what that was. I knew that was kind of his way. And I'm actually getting a little misty-eyed right now of saying goodbye to his trainer. It was so powerful, and it was a great match. They don't have the replay back up because I think it was one of those things where they wanted you to watch live. But it was a great match. And the big news out of this whole thing, those folks raised $53,000 on their Indiegogo. All of the funds going to the wrestlers, the crew that helped do this endeavor for 24 hours. And Leo kicked it off. So call him the $53,000 man, if you ask me, to set the tone for that event this weekend.
Yeah, look, as a pro wrestling promoter of 25 plus years, hats off to GCW.
Heck yeah.
I mean, putting that together, and I give them props, to putting that together and given the opportunity for all the performers, not just, like you said, not just the wrestlers, but people helping backstage and production and everybody that helped to get a payday and make some money doing something that they love. It's awesome to hear. That money, $53,000, amazing.
Yeah, Leo's going to get to see a little bit of that, and all of the competitors and the crew that took a part in that are going to get to see a bit of it. Who knows? Maybe we can raise $53,000 and buy me a coffee.
Right. People need to start buying coffee.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, so, and give a shout out to that. The GCW, is that up on YouTube now? Can they go and watch it?
That's the thing. If you watched it live, you saw it. And I think that was kind of the appeal of it, to keep people watching and donating, because now since it ended last night at around 8:45, it's down.
It's down.
If you go to the link, it says, this live stream is not, available. They did have some kinks during the stream. A lot of audio dropping out, sometimes picture gone. So they're probably editing that up. But yeah.
Now, was it streamed on Fight?
It was streamed for free on Fight.
They might be able to go back.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah. I watched it on YouTube. I thought the chat was a little bit more fun.
With Fight being FITE.
Yes, FITE, fight.tv. And it might be up there.
Okay.
But real quick, we went over a lot of topics. We got Kevin Ecktourage in the house. Let's pause real quick, guys, for little station identification.
Come back and talk to Kevin Ecktourage.
Indeed.
All right.
We hope you're enjoying this week's episode of the MCW Cast. At MCW Pro Wrestling, much like many small businesses throughout the country, the pandemic has presented many challenges. For a company like ours that hosts events with live audiences, the impact has been even more severe, and all of our forms of revenue have been cut off. In order to continue to engage with our fans on a regular basis, we made the decision to begin to produce the MCW Cast and are providing it for absolutely no cost on Facebook Live, Twitch, YouTube, and SoundCloud. If you'd like to support us during these challenging times, you can do so in several ways. The most popular way is to buy us a coffee to help fuel the cast. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/MCWcast, and for just $3, you can buy the cast a coffee, or you can choose to become a member of the cast for just $5 a month and receive several special perks. That's buymeacoffee.com/MCWcast. You can also contribute directly on Cash App, MCW Wrestling, or on Venmo, MCW-Wrestling. You can also show your support for the MCW Cast while sporting some great gear by going to teespring.com/stores/MCWcast to pick up a full line of official MCW Cast merchandise, from coffee mugs and face coverings to t-shirts and sweatshirts. Also, don't forget to comment in the threads on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch to get your questions answered on a future episode. And you can also send us a tweet using the hashtag AskMCWCast. Thank you for your support, and now, back to the show.
All right, we are back here at the MCW Cast. We are joined with our special guest, Kevin Eck. Kevin, let's take our fans back and hear a little bit about your early days in the business, but even before that, your days as a wrestling fan, and what led you to this business.
Okay, so I became a fan at a very young age, 6 years old. My parents were not wrestling fans, so I still to this day don't know how it happened. But somehow it ended up on my TV screen. And at 6 years old, I saw it, Channel 45 at 4 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, and immediately fell in love with it. And then at like 2 matches in, they would go to a local interview with Vince McMahon saying, coming to the Baltimore Civic Center and it was December 26th, 1973, that WWF was coming to town. So I said, we got to go to this. And I begged my parents to take me. And basically, they took me to that first show, and I was hooked. And that led to WWF was monthly at that time in Baltimore. So every month, I was there at the Baltimore Civic Center, seeing Bruno Sammartino and Killer Kowalski and the Valiant Brothers, and Gorilla Monsoon. I could go on and on with all these people. And that's really the start of it. I was obsessed with it from that point on.
I think that's like most of us probably have that same story. But like early days, you're definitely someone that I've known you for 25 years. Probably started as like I met you, and then we became acquaintances, and gradually have grown into where I can I think we're pretty good friends.
Absolutely.
We've become over the years, but like when I was getting this interview together with you, kind of trying to touch base on some bullet points, I was trying to remember how exactly we met, and I feel like me and you were connected through Axel, because I started training with Axel in the early 90s, right out of high school, 91, 92, and I feel like maybe I met you, like we got connected through Axel, correct? Isn't that kind of how we got to know each other?
That is correct. And I think, were you part of the Kwaisi and Fume show?
Yes.
I appeared on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was Axel and me and you and there was some other people on it as well. I can't remember who else was on it.
I remember that. I remember that.
That's funny that you bring that up.
Too Dope and Sideswipe. That's right.
So during the Bruiser show, when we were putting the show together, the Bruiser tribute show. It's so funny that you bring that up. I specifically wanted Too Dope and Sideswipe to do a segment on the show, a backstage interview, because of that show. Because I knew, keep in mind, at the time we were filming this, RJ hadn't passed. We were leading up to that show, and he was going to be able to watch it, and we were putting the show together. And so on that show, what happened was there was a point where like Axel and you on the show, I totally forgot about that, but everybody was answering all these questions about professional wrestling being a business, and very elegantly, and then they say something about, the host asked about getting hurt in the ring, and Sideswipe just interjects and cuts everybody off and says, yeah, sometimes I get hurt so bad, I just drive home like this. Right? And everybody turned and looked and was like, what? On stage. And for years, that was something that me and Axel and Too Dope and Sideswipe, even Sideswipe was like, I don't know why I said that. Like, I just didn't know what to say. Like, they asked him a question, and he was like, I just froze. I just said it. It was just so ridiculous.
That sounds like Sideswipe.
Right? So, but RJ and me and Axel and Earl the Pearl and Shamrock, like, that was such, we would cry laughing years later. So specifically, that backstage segment that we had filmed was done for an audience of one. It was done for RJ.
Right, yeah.
So that he could see it when we put it in the show, because I knew no matter what I knew he would laugh. It was just something that we laughed at for years. But interesting.
Dan, I knew it was important to you that he see it, so he did see it.
Did he laugh?
He did. He did. Well, he
as much right.
He definitely. I showed it to him early in that day. Yeah, he did. He definitely made a recognition of it. He absolutely did.
That's interesting. That's exactly now that you bring that up.
But yeah, I think it was because of Axel and I getting to know each other. That's how I ended up on that show with you guys. But yeah, we were doing a radio show back in the day.
Right.
We were doing a once-a-week wrestling show, and it was Axel and I co-hosting it. And so that's how we really got to know each other.
Yeah. I knew it was that. I couldn't put two and two together, and I'm like, I know it's been 25 years, but how was it? But yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I'm glad you took me back down memory lane to remind you about the Kwaisi and Fume show. I remember also that episode. I don't know if WWF was running opposite it on WBFF or WCW and WNUV. These are local stations in the Baltimore area, but something about it, I wasn't staying on that. But I definitely remember flipping and being like, oh, they got wrestlers on Kwesi and Fume's show, but this isn't Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
We did a match. We did a match in studio.
They did it. Yes, they did do a match. And they had Axel and I think, doing the commentary for it.
And props to him, as he's a senator now.
Yeah.
He was so respectful. A lot of people we go on, he was a political guy. He was a political guy then. He was so respectful to us and treated us so well. Didn't look down on us, was very interested in learning about the business, and was in no way just derogatory. And you get that a lot from people, that they just tend to look down. But I always really appreciated and respected that about him. He treated us so respectfully and with such respect.
Kind of like how we brought up the passing of Larry King, and how Larry King would always, as a journalist, not really be, bring these guys out to laugh them or mock our culture, but actually to learn. His curiosity about what is this? Who are these folks that do this, and what motivates them? So
Right. I'll never forget, just going off of that, the Bill Maher show back, not his current one, but the one he used to do Politically Incorrect. He had WCW people on. I don't know if you've ever seen this clip.
No, I haven't.
He was not very respectful. He had Roddy Piper.
I could believe that.
He had Roddy Piper, Medusa, Sting. I can't remember who else. And this was the height of the Monday Night Wars, and the business had become more open, and everybody knew what was going on backstage and all that. And so Bill Maher, the way he phrased the question was, he said, so everybody's in on the joke now, right? Well, Roddy did not appreciate the word joke being used. Roddy immediately stood up, undid his pants, pulled them down a little bit, and showed where he had a scar because he had his hip replaced. So immediately that set the tone for that interview. And I'll just never. But that speaks to what you're saying about how not everyone outside the business was respectful. So he did. Like I said, Roddy, the word joke was not something that he was happy to hear.
Yeah, well, Kevin, speaking of Kwesi and Fume and the origins of how you and Dan met, I remember I first used to see your name in print in the Baltimore Sun. And I remembered when I would be arguing with my friends in school, and going to school, it's fake, they're not really, why isn't it in the paper?
Right.
There would be times where I would see you reference wrestling, whatever it was, coming to the Baltimore Arena, Nitro or Raw, and I would be like, you see, that's how you know it's real. Because they don't give it all the coverage, but sometimes someone's writing about it. So can you tell me about how in the Baltimore Sun, as a youth growing up, trying to get involved and thinking maybe this might be my future, how I saw you kind of associated with wrestling through the paper?
Sure. So I started in the journalism business really young. Like I happened to know someone who knew someone who got me into the old News American. I don't know if you guys remember the News American. It went belly up in 1986. So I started when I was in high school still as just a unpaid gopher.
Paying your dues, brother.
Paying my dues.
That's why I'm here at the table. That's what I started.
Answering phones, taking high school scores over the phone, like by hand. We actually took them by hand. Going across the street to the Inner Harbor to do food runs for the sports writers and the copy-editors. That's how I got in. So I ended up, after that, at the Baltimore Sun. I started there in 87, I think. And I was just, again, as a clerk, an editorial assistant, is what we call them, entry-level position. But the thing is you could write some. If you showed an aptitude for it, they would give you opportunities to do some writing. Mostly high school stuff, but you could do whatever. I would always push to get pro wrestling in the paper. And they were the people in charge back then were very, very stuffy in how they looked at wrestling. It's not a sport. It will not appear in our sports section. Okay, and that's the way it was for the longest time. Now, eventually, if I could somehow tie it to sports, they would say okay. So the first story I ever did, Randy Macho Man Savage, you probably all know, played some minor league baseball. I think it was SummerSlam. It was it was King of the Ring was coming to Baltimore in 1994.
I remember this. I know where I remember this. This is one of the times. Yeah.
Okay. So, and Randy Savage was coming to town to do a publicity, to talk to the media and stuff. He was actually doing a signing at a supermarket somewhere.
Out on Route 40.
Yes.
It was the Super Fresh on Route 40.
That's
I
correct.
remember all of
That is
this.
correct.
Like seriously.
Thank
yeah.
God you're filling in the
Wow.
blanks.
Oh yeah, I remember it. Because like I said, wrestling. I was always that kid in school that was like, "It's real, guys." La 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 la. I don't want to hear what you're saying. And these were to me like I remember. See, it's in the but continue. I'm sorry.
These were your moments of validation.
Absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, I pitched the story of, hey, Randy Savage is coming to town. I can interview with him, and we'll base it off of course, we'll mention that he's coming to town for King of the Ring, and we'll promote it and all that. But we'll talk about how he used to play minor league baseball. And so I got the thumbs up on that one. So that was the first pro wrestling story that I had ever written for the Sun. This was 1994.
Absolutely, yep.
And then from there, and that's a story in itself. I mean, just interviewing Randy Savage in the back of a Super Fresh. Like it was.
So you did the interview at that Super Fresh that he was appearing in?
Yes. Went down to the Super Fresh, and there was a WWE PR person there. They took me and Randy into the back, like in the storage area in the back of the Super Fresh. And that's where I did the interview.
Unbelievable.
So yeah, that was my first one.
Wow.
And then after that, it was just like whenever, luckily the Monday Night Wars really started not too long, and they were getting good houses, so it's like, oh, people started to notice this is actually kind of
ratings, insane
ratings. People at the paper started to notice like this is popular, right? But I was going up against these stuff, and I love all these people that I work with at the Sun, but they were stuffy, it's like wrestling can't be in the paper unless it can be somehow with sports. So another thing I pitched was Lawrence Taylor doing WrestleMania. And I was like, and it was in Connecticut, Hartford, Connecticut. I said, how about if I do a story on that? Because, he's LT.
He's LT, yeah.
So on my own dime, because they weren't going to pay for it, I booked, took a train to Hartford, Connecticut, and got press credentials and all that, and covered that for the paper. So then, again, but still they wouldn't be like, yeah, we want you to do this on a regular basis. But the entertainment section, they noticed, wow, this stuff is really popular. So then, anytime WWF or WCW came to town, I got hooked up with an interview to promote the show.
I remember one time the arts and entertainment section had Savage on the front. That may have been the King of the Ring, or
that was a different one.
It was, but it was an insert. You could pull it out of the paper like you could pull the funnies out of the paper. And one time, Savage was on the front of it in all its glory, and I was like, this is another, see, here it is, wrestling's real. I think by then I maybe was a little bit closer to thinking, there was something up. I mean, it was on the arts and entertainment section of the paper, but...
and not the sports section.
So here's the really funny part to it is, by the time, I'd say it's maybe 2007, probably at 2007, blogs become a big thing. And the Baltimore Sun dips their toe into the blog world, and basically, they basically said, if you have expertise on any subject, we want you to write a blog. I never thought about it, right? So they approached me and said, how about doing a pro wrestling blog? And this was actually going to be in the sports section now. Not in the paper, but on the sports section of the website. Because it all became about getting clicks and getting views. And it's like, this stuff's pretty popular. We want those clicks for us, not the entertainment side. All of a sudden... Once the newspaper industry starts dying, then all those old, we can't do this, we can't do that, they kind of fall by the wayside. We're going to do whatever we got to do to survive. So I said, oh, how much extra do I get paid to do this? Like, oh, no, it's not extra. This is just in addition to your, regular 40-hour-a-week job, you'll do this blog. And I said, no, I will not do this blog. Like, you learn, you don't work for free.
Right, yeah.
I mean, you can't, right? So I said, no, I'm not going to do it. So there's another person who was a fan, who was a copy editor at the Sun. And he said, he got wind of, they were considering doing the wrestling blog. And he's like, well, maybe I'll do it. I said, no. If anybody's going to do it, I'm going to do it. Right. Like, I'm not going to let somebody else do it. So swallowed my pride and said, okay, I'm going to do this wrestling blog. Again, for no extra pay. And I became obsessed with it. Like, if you're going to do something, you got to do it to the best of your ability. And, I'm not ultra competitive, but I guess I am a little bit, because we would get the traffic reports every week of how this is doing. I was like, since this is extra and I'm not getting paid, maybe I'll write twice a week. But then I noticed that we would start seeing the numbers for all the blogs, sports, entertainment, news. And my blog, which I called Ring Posts, was always up there in the top 4 or 5, whatever. And I was like, that's with me not even trying. So then I became obsessed, and I was writing like every day of the week, sometimes 2-3 times a day if there was news. And it got to the point where it was the number 2 blog most of the time on the whole Baltimore Sun website. Only the Ravens would get more clicks. So, and look, it ultimately did, you know, even though I felt like a little bit like a sucker for doing this for no extra pay, I fully believe I would not have gotten my job as a WWE writer had it not been for that blog.
Wow, that's great. That's going to lead us right to our next portion. Because you started with WCW, right?
You went to WCW Magazine, and that was when? When did you go to work for WCW?
Right, I had been at the Sun for like 14 years, and you know, I thought I would. You know, I'm a Baltimore guy, you know, and I'm provincial, as a lot of us are. I'm like, I'm going to work at the Sun till I retire, and I'm going to live in Baltimore for the rest of my life. So my wife, who at the time was my fiance, this is like 1999, I believe.
That's when I graduated high school.
Yeah, thanks.
just to date myself out there, everyone that's listening.
Thanks a lot.
Sorry.
So she wanted to go on a cruise. Let's go on a cruise. I'm like, you know, I'm not. I had been on a cruise once before. It's not that big a deal to me. But then I saw that WCW was doing the Bruise Cruise. So I said, well, how about we do the Bruise Cruise? And look, my wife's not a wrestling fan.
Right.
This is just how every wrestling fan thinks, because I would have done the same thing.
Right.
Like, I would have believed me, oh, you want to go on a cruise? That's
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I
Let me
mean?
sweeten the pot for myself here.
Exactly.
It's like, you know what I mean? Like, WrestleMania would be in New Orleans. Hey, have you ever thought about going to New Orleans, dear?
I did a whole vacation like that in 2017.
That's exactly how
100%.
wrestling fans think. I think everybody watching this, everybody at this table, we all get it.
Yeah.
So okay. So she's like, yeah, let's do the Bruise Cruise. So we do the cruise. And I don't know if you guys have ever been on a cruise before, but they give you seating assignments for dinner. Like you sit with people, you don't get to pick it. So since it was a WCW cruise, there were a lot of WCW employees there. And I got seated at a table with a woman who worked in marketing. And, you know, you strike up a conversation. What do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a writer, work for the Baltimore Sun, blah, blah, blah. She's like, oh, well, you know, WCW Magazine, we're actually like retooling it. It's like they had outsourced it at that point. She's like, we're bringing it in-house. And I know they're probably, you know, looking for some writers, you know, freelance writers, whatever. It's like, oh, this is great. Freelance, that's perfect. You know, like all I'm thinking is I'll get to write maybe, you know, once a month for, you know, make a little extra cash, right? Okay. So she puts me in touch with the publisher. And his name is Ken Liker, and so once we, you know, get back on land and everything, and the magazine's getting ready to get. Actually, I think it had just started. I think they just put out their first issue, and he said, "Okay, send me your resume." And okay, so I did that. He came from newspapers himself, so he was not a real wrestling guy. He was more of a journalist and newspaper guy. He loved the fact that I worked for a, you know, legitimate newspaper, and he didn't want to just hire some really, you know, wrestling, right, you know. He's like, this is great. He's like, you know all this stuff about wrestling, and like you've been in the journalism business for 14 years. Like, this is good. He goes, however, right now we don't really have a freelance budget. So he's like, but you know, as soon as we do, like, I'll keep you in mind. So I didn't hear anything for a little bit. I would check in with him every once in a while, just to, you know, keep touch. Anything? No, not yet, but you know, okay. Then out of the blue, I get a call from him, and I was like, "Oh, this is great! Like, now I get to, you know, do my freelance gig." Well, he was unhappy with the previous editor, the editor that he had at that point. He wasn't happy with him, so he calls not to offer me a freelance writing position. He's like, "How would you like to be the editor of WCW Magazine?" I was like, "Wow, the editor." I'm like, "Can I do that from Baltimore?" No, you would have to move down to Atlanta. Wow, 14 years in at the Baltimore Sun. Never left Baltimore in my life. Like, this is where I'm going to die. Like, this is, I was like, wow, let me think about that. And so, you know, long story short is, you know, talk to my fiance, now my wife. Like this was early in 2000. We were getting married at the end of 2000.
Mm-hmm.
So we're like, wow, this is a big decision. She's a Baltimore girl too, but she was not tied. She's like, no, this will be like an adventure. Like, let's go live in Atlanta. And so I did. I left the Sun at that point and went down to WCW to be the editor of the magazine. Now, this was March of 2000 that I started.
Oh, this is very close to when
when
they were bought,
Right.
Yeah.
A year later, right?
And so at the time, if you guys remember, in March of 2000, the Monday Night Wars, for all intents and purposes,
We're over.
were over.
Yeah.
WWE was killing WCW every Monday night. And I was very aware of what the situation was, but I still believed in my head, or I talked myself into it. I'm like, this business is cyclical, and for 83 weeks before that, WCW was kicking their ass, and I'm like, they can turn this around, So and plus, WCW came from the NWA, which if you shake the lineage back to the original, like this company's, you could really say, has been around for like 100 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're not going anywhere. So I took the job, and literally I'd been there for about a month when we started hearing the rumors of it's going to get bought, it's going to fold. It's kind of like, oh, great,
Right.
I've just picked up everything and moved to Atlanta. And it was 1 year, almost like 1 year to the day, until we got bought. So.
Wow.
That is amazing.
And you found out, I guess. So you were. That's interesting. You were working there at that time. Did you just? Was it like everybody just found out, like when WWE, when they were going on the air announcing it, or did you?
No,
guys...
we knew. We had heard all kind of rumors, and if you'll remember, Eric Bischoff had put together a group.
I remember that.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Because he had left, and he had been.
Yeah.
That's right.
Took some time off to get
some time off.
Right.
So he had put together a group. He worked with this company called Fusion, which was a media company. And it was announced that they were buying the company. They were buying WCW. And so they actually started. Bischoff came back into the office, and they were doing their due diligence. And now we at the magazine were a little worried, even though, it looked like the company was going to survive. We had heard all kinds of things about Bischoff was going to really streamline things down. And so we're like, there's probably not going to be a magazine, or he'll do it on
the internet.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we thought, this is great. WCW is going to survive. We probably won't, right? So then that thing fell through. Didn't happen. So then the big rumor became WWE. Like it was just out there. WWE was going to buy it, and we were pretty sure at that point that it was going to happen, and that we probably weren't going to be retained. Mm-hmm. So I was there in Florida that night, the famous Nitro.
Oh, were you?
I was there. Yeah, like we knew that was the end. We knew we knew the angle was going to happen with Shane McMahon.
So you knew that was coming, Shane McMahon and all.
Yeah, we all knew that. They were there that day, and basically they took over.
I've heard this a lot. Yeah,
Shane and Bruce Pritchard and all those guys.
And they just took over.
They walked in and they said, "This is our show now," and so they took charge. And we knew that's probably going to be the end. So,
and that was the last episode. Right?
That was the last episode.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what the last match was?
Sting and Flair.
You got it. Yep.
Yeah. Flair had to wear a T-shirt.
I remember that.
Yeah.
It was sad. It was so sad.
Yeah.
They hugged it at the end, and I was like, "Wow, I love WWE, but this is sad."
Yeah. So after that, when we got back to Atlanta, they called all employee meeting in the power plant, which was where it was attached to the office, and we knew that was it. Like we walked in, and there was a human resources person from WWE who basically told us all that we're all being let go, and gave us our information. You'll get a severance package. And
so I was going to ask, did you get a severance package?
We did get severance, yeah, and that was the end. And they actually did, they threw us this little bit of hope, like if anybody would like to work for WWE, here, fill out this form and this and that. And, other than agents like Arn Anderson and Dean Malenko and Fit Finlay, I don't think anybody in the office got a job at WWE.
Well, now they had their own magazine, and theirs continued until only recent years
recently,
before.
yeah.
Right, because my kids had a subscription to it. Was there consideration to try to get in on their magazine?
I reached out. The publisher at that time was a guy named Barry Warner, and I reached out to him. I got his email address, and again, he was like, "I know who you are," very complimenting, but just we just don't have any openings right now, and so that was that. That never really went anywhere.
But that wasn't the end of your story with WWE, and we're gonna take one more quick break, real quick. Pause for station identification, and then when we come back, we're gonna hear about your greener pastures.
The next stage of your career.
Indeed,
Right.
yeah, right on. We'll be back.
Engage with the MCW Cast on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch for a chance to get your questions answered on a future episode of the cast. Or send us a tweet with the hashtag AskMCWCast.
All right, we're back, and Kevin, I got to ask you, when I transitioned and I went from being a wrestling fan and kind of made it, I was young, into the business, 18, 19 years old, right out of high school. There was a lot of things that opened my eyes when you start training, you go behind the scenes. We're at a point kind of in your story where you've gone from Baltimore Sun, you start working in WCW Magazine. Before we go on to the next thing of you getting a job writing for the WWE, at that point in your life, you're kind of starting to see things behind the scene. Was there anything kind of shocking to you? Anything like,
Well,
when you see behind the scene?
when you say that, one of the first times I was behind the scenes was actually at an MCW show at Michael's 8th Avenue.
Okay.
And it was the night, I remember you brought in Yokozuna and Terry Funk, I think, on the same night.
So we had Terry Funk advertised.
Yoko was a surprise.
Shout out to Tom Casati. Hey, bro.
Hey,
Tom Casati for bringing in Yokozuna. He brought Yokozuna in as a surprise right off of WWE television. I mean, equivalent now, that was a surprise, equivalent to
Rowan.
like a top guy. Yeah,
Because Rowan just appeared on that indie thing. Rowan Breadbeard.
Okay.
Who actually appeared on AEW first.
Right.
On the Brody Tribute show. But it was a big deal because he's been fresh off of WWE. This was his first match.
Right.
So, yeah, I know what you mean with Yoko.
Yeah. So, and, it's equivalent to like a top guy all of a sudden unadvertised popping on a show, like now maybe like a Braun Strowman or something.
Mm-hmm.
There was because Yoko obviously was a top guy.
Oh, yeah, Rowan wasn't really a top guy.
Yeah, it's not like a top guy, like a Braun Strowman. All of a sudden he's off WWE TV for 2 months and he just pops up on an indie show.
Former champion.
As a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
People were like, oh my God. So that was that night.
Yeah, so I hadn't been backstage at a lot of shows at that point, and you brought me in because I was going to interview Yokozuna and Terry Funk. I think I was taping interviews, recording them for my radio show that I was doing with Axel.
So this is early 2000s.
Yeah.
Right. So
before my time.
So this is really around, like when I talked earlier about having a foggy memory, this is where my memories of me and you start coming in, because I remember you started coming around. We started having more of a closer relationship and conversation.
Actually, I think it was before. I think it was like 98 or 99. Because I hadn't left.
You know what? You're right.
I hadn't left to go to WCW yet. So.
You're right. That show must have been late 98, 99. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, because Yoko didn't live much longer after that.
Right. He passed. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it was. You're right. Yeah, it was like late 90s, 98, 99. So
the shocking thing for me, or the eye-opener, as you put it, was... I had been friendly with Axel at that point, and, there was a lot of, heard a lot of things about Axel with drugs and things like that, but I had never actually seen anything.
Mm-hmm.
And he would always kind of like joke about, like we did the radio show, he would make jokes about it, but I couldn't tell if he was serious or joke, whatever.
That was Axel made jokes to feel you out.
Yeah.
About that. I mean, this isn't anything like
right.
We're not talking about anything. Axel was very open.
That's true.
Before he's passing about it, so we're not burying or anything.
Right.
We're talking about anything Axel didn't, the last couple of years of his life talk about very openly.
Exactly. But he had never come right out to me and said, all this stuff you hear. He never said anything like that. So that night at that show, Axel wasn't wrestling, but he had to cut a promo in the ring. And he was in street clothes. And this is back in the days when every wrestler had a fanny pack.
Yep.
Right? Mm-hmm. So Axel's like, he comes up to me and goes, hey, Kev, I got to go cut this promo in the ring. Takes off the fanny pack. He goes, here, will you hold my drugs for me? And I'm like, oh, it's another joke, right? I just looked at him kind of funny. He goes, yeah, it's my... He unzipped it, shows me, and like there's white powder in there. That's cocaine. Look, I'd never seen cocaine in my life.
Probably a meatball.
Or 16 ball.
Yeah. Kilo.
That's a kilo, probably.
So, and at that point he asked me, he goes, well, do you do drugs? And I just kind of looked at him. He goes, well, I don't know, do you? And I'm like, "Oh man, no." He goes, "Oh, okay, well that's good then. Here." And he goes, "I just want you to hold this for me while I go to the ring." He's like, "You're the only guy I trust back. I give it to any of these other guys. Like they'll take it." Okay. And I'm like scared to death. Like I've never, like I said, I've never seen cocaine before. Now I'm holding it. And isn't this like, don't you hear stories about this? Like you get caught with drugs and you're like, it's not mine. I'm holding it for my friend.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, is this a rib? Like, is Axel going to have like somebody like a cop come in or something? And here I am.
He's out the door.
He's out the door.
Yeah, he's in Glenburg.
Here's somebody who's never done anything like this, and I'm going to get like, stuck, I can see that Baltimore Sun writer, busted for cocaine possession. So I'm like, okay.
So you'd have got distribution charges.
Right.
Yeah, we aren't talking residue here.
Right.
We-
So Axel goes in the ring, cuts his promo, and the whole time I'm just sweating, holding this in my hands. I'm like, God, I hope he.
Which just adds to if you would have gotten caught. Now you look coked up.
Right.
You're so bullets, yeah.
I couldn't have looked any more shady or fidgety or whatever.
Boy, this podcast is going off the rails.
So then finally, there's not a great punchline to the story. It's just, Axel cuts his promo, comes back. Hey, you got my drugs? Yeah, I hand it back to him, and I survived it. But I could tell you, my heart was, beating a mile a minute that whole time he was in the ring cutting that promo.
So just to put a little buffer here, nobody in the back would have taken it. That was at Axel's point where like the paranoia had just gotten out of control, and that was towards where me and Axel really started having trouble. And it was because of his demons that he could never get under control, that ultimately led to his death. But, just so you know, in that locker room, no, there wasn't a bunch of other people that would have. That was actually paranoia, and that, unfortunately, was just kind of,
Downward spiral.
A downward spiral.
Well, when I came into the business, I had heard all these rumors about Axel, and he was obviously close with RJ, and then he started hanging out with us a little bit more, and so I established like a rule, and I was like, no drugs in the house. Now, this I just didn't want the rumors to be true. So what ended up happening was Axel would wind up coming to hang out at our house like every Sunday, and we'd make food and all that stuff. He would just do the drugs before he got there, and then he would pass out on my floor for sometimes overnight for extended. And I was like, well, I don't know if this is better. So, but I'd heard those same rumors too.
And that was the big escalation with me and Axel falling apart was RJ. Because I hated that he was kind of sucking RJ into that world.
Yeah.
And that's when
I hated him for that too.
And so
100%.
here's so you talk about like what's the dark side of the ring, and that's what I didn't want that element around, because Axel was a guy that people looked up to. To me, he was still just Axel because he had trained me. We had gone back a decade, to the early 90s. But to young guys like RJ, he was Axel Rotten, superstar from ECW, barbed wire bat. Axel was over. He was worldwide known. And that was pressure. That was pressure. I'm not going to say about people that were in the room, but I remember when I was young in the business and was going to ECW and stuff like that. And I remember walking, going into hotel rooms and drugs being on the table, and you look around and there's all these top guys, and it's a lot of pressure to say no to. And, that was like, I hated that. I hated that about Axel when I saw RJ kind of start to go in that direction. And again, RJ's been, was open, about problems and struggles he ran into. But yeah, that was where, so right around that time is where the disintegration really of me and Axel was happening in real time at that point, probably around that show. So to go from there, after that, so after WCW and all that, as you're kind of transitioning and starting to see the behind the scenes things, the next thing, big moment in your career, you get an opportunity. And you and at that point, I think you came back. Did you come back and start doing ring posts again after WCW?
So
post the blog? Because I remember it getting really over to
Yeah.
where like a lot of like the big blog writers were quoting you, and
Right,
you
right.
you were breaking stories
yeah,
that
so
other people weren't.
So when I came back, luckily I was able to come back to Baltimore. I got my old job back at the Baltimore Sun. Had a quick stop working for the Baltimore Ravens for a few months because the Sun had a hiring freeze. And then as soon as the hiring freeze was off, I got back in there. So I only worked for the Ravens, worked for their website for like 3 months. But yeah, so I got back in. And so this is like 2001, 2002 that I'm back at the Baltimore Sun. The blog didn't start till like 2007, right? So by the time the blog, it was like 2007 when the blog started. And it did, like we talked about, before we went to the last break, it started really taking off. There weren't a lot. Now everyone has a blog, everyone has a podcast. There's all this stuff. Back then, there weren't many mainstream newspapers, mainstream news organizations covering professional wrestling. So the Ring Post blog, it got picked up. The dirt sites would pick it up whenever there was a story that I had or an interview that I did. So it really started to grow, and it got my name out there more and more. Now, Kevin Dunn, I'm sure everybody knows who Kevin Dunn is,
Mhm.
worked WWE executive producer for years and years and years. He's a Baltimore guy, and went to Delaney High School, and he became aware of the blog because he read the Baltimore Sun for Ravens and Orioles coverage and everything else. It was his local news outlet, so he started reading the blog and became aware of it. And I had heard from other people in WWE that he was a fan of it, and that he liked that I was fair. That's what I heard. He's like, if you criticize us or you have a critique, it's constructive criticism, and you explain why. You don't just take cheap shots, because even at that point, a lot of mainstream media, as we talked about earlier, still kind of looking down on the business. So he's the one that really facilitated me getting an interview there. I also got to know Big John Gaborick.
Oh yeah,
Right, from
yeah,
Tough
of
Enough.
course.
Yeah. So John also was like familiar with me in the blog. So we had this whole Baltimore connection. We all went to the same college, Towson State. Obviously not at the same time, but so we had this whole little connection there. And WWE was in town for a SmackDown, and he's like, John and I got a drink at the hotel bar afterwards, and he's like, hey, have you ever did you say hello to Kevin Dunn? I said, no, I've actually never been, really introduced to him. Oh, come on, I'll introduce you. So he introduces me to Kevin Dunn, and Kevin once again said, read the blog, and, you're fair and all this. And he said, have you ever thought about working for us? I said, well, my entire life.
Right.
Right.
He goes, yeah. He goes, we're always looking for writers, and I can put your name in there. So I actually jumped ahead here a little bit, and I'll tell it now. I said, well, Kevin, I actually interviewed for a writing job back in 2001, and you guys didn't hire me. And he goes, oh, well, things are different now, and I think send me your resume, and so that's what put the wheels in motion. So quick story going back, after WCW went down, I'd reached out to the magazine editor. That didn't work. So then I thought, what? I've always wanted to get into the creative aspect of it. That's what I really wanted to do. And I knew, you would see on different websites, like WWE's always looking for writers and this and that. So I just sent a cold email to them saying, I'd like, how do I apply for a writing job? And they responded back, and it was basically, they wanted you to submit 2 sample scripts using WWE characters, and you come up with a whole arc of a program, from beginning to end, the matches that take place, the promos, the angles, the whole thing. And so I did that, submitted it, and they liked it to the point where they actually brought me in for an interview. Went to Stamford, met with the creative team, which at the time, Brian Gewirtz was on the team, and Paul Heyman was there, and Michael Hayes was there. Stephanie was in charge. Stephanie McMahon was in charge of the team at that point. I was only supposed to be in for it was in and out in one day. And Stephanie says to me on the first day, she's like, I want you to come back, tomorrow for the second half of our meeting. She's like, Triple H is making his comeback soon to TV. He had been off TV. This might have been when he had tore his quad. I can't remember specifically. But she's like, I want you to come up with a storyline for how we reintroduce Hunter and present it to the team tomorrow. I said, well, I'm only supposed to be here for one night or for one day. Like I didn't pack clothes to stay overnight. And she's like, well, that's not a problem, is it? No, of course not. No, of course not. She's like, yeah, we'll have our driver, take you to the Stamford Mall and you can pick up some toiletries or whatever, if you need, because I have nothing. So I did that. I'm in my hotel room that night, and I'm coming up with a storyline. Go back the next day, present it, the whole thing. And I'm thinking it kind of went okay. Feeling pretty good about it. Go back home. About a week later, they called me and said, thanks for coming up, and appreciate it, but we're not going forward with you at this time. I was like, wow, I thought I did okay. So to me, that was the end of it. Like that, I got my shot.
That was in 2000.
That was 2001.
Right after WCW.
Right after WCW.
Okay.
I felt like, all right, how many people can say they at least had an interview for their dream? I got an audience with them. I took my best shot. Ultimately, they, and I actually asked them, when they said no, I said, well, can I ask why? And they said, well, we're really, your background's in journalism and you don't really have any creative writing experience. And, we're looking for like soap opera writers and this, I got that whole thing. I was like, okay, well, I wanted to say, well, you knew what my resume was before you brought me up, but okay. So I thought that was the end, the dream's over and that's the end. But then, like I said, fast forward 8 years or whatever it was, I guess it was 2010 that I had that conversation with Kevin Dunn. And 2011, they same thing, brought me up for the interview, whole 9 yards, and this time they offered me the job.
Well, that's an amazing
Yeah,
story.
that is.
Wow.
Yeah,
Definitely. I wanted to ask, you went up there for that first interview and they eventually called you and told you, we're not going to go with you. Were you discouraged then? Did you think it was over? I'm never going to get this opportunity. They know who I am, or?
I was disappointed. I was very disappointed because I thought I got the sense that it went well, and it's like, man, like I didn't think of it. I really convinced myself that they were gonna want me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was disappointing, and I remember eventually I got to a point where I just okay, well I took my shot. Mm-hmm. I still got a good job here in Baltimore, and all that. So it wasn't like my life was over or anything like that. It's like, okay, took the shot, didn't get it. Part of me was, because I was doing some freelance writing at that point, I was writing for Wrestling Digest, which was a publication, I don't know if you guys are big sports fans, but very similar to Baseball Digest, Football Digest. It was a little, smaller magazine. And so I'm writing for them, and I thought, it was at a time when WWE's storylines it was like 2000, they were starting to go down. So I'm like, wow, I can really... I'll take out my frustrations a little bit and write about how crappy the product is.
Yeah.
You don't want to hire me? All right. I'll point out how lousy your product is. You'll wish you had hired me.
I bring that up to you, Kevin, because it's kind of a personal story with me. Is I have a similar interaction with WWE where I was kind of put on the spot, thinking I was only going to be there for one night, and they were like, at the end of the night, they were like, "So we'll see you tomorrow, right?" And
this must be a thing that they do.
This is what I'm saying. I've never really shared this story with anyone because, it's a private story. But I as well was backstage in an extra role for a Raw when they were here in the Baltimore area. And, I saw a lot of my former colleagues that I worked with on the Indies. I saw a few people that I worked with right here in MCW Pro, D. Edwards. And the night's over, and I'm like, wow, well, that was my backstage experience at WWE. And Mark Carano, he's like, so we're in Norfolk, Virginia tomorrow. We'll see you there, right? And I'm like, yeah, you will see me there. And he's like, all right, excellent. Be there bright and early and make sure you're looking like you're looking. I was in a suit. Make sure you're looking like you're looking tonight. Maybe we'll have something for you. And, it was kind of like, I was like, am I being put on the spot to see how dedicated, how far I'll go? And it sounds like that's been kind of part of the course since 2001. My story was in 2017, so...
I also have a similar story, and my first interaction was through Kevin Dunn as well. Actually, was how I got into wrestling, was Kevin Dunn being a high school friend of a manager where I was working at a bar. But I was an extra as well. I was with Godfather. And
Oh wow, I'm finding this footage.
the same thing happened, and I had it was arranged through Kevin Dunn by way of being a high school buddy with my manager at the bar. And I went, did my thing, was on the Ho train that night, and then Tony Gurria came in and said, "So we'll see you tomorrow in DC." Oh, okay. I mean, I got to work, but okay.
Same.
Like,
Yeah.
And I didn't know, and like I said, this was my very first time. My very first time in a ring was, at the Baltimore Arena in front of all those people, and so I didn't know either. And I was like, "Yes, I will be here tomorrow." Okay, great. And so it sounds like that might be something they do.
But then when it doesn't go anywhere, it's we're in the nature of my in 2001, where it's like, hey, good job, but not good enough right now. Where you then discouraged to the point, well, that was my WWE career. I tried, and they just don't want me.
Yep.
That's definitely kind of the feeling I was having to reveal, but here I am at the MCW Cast, and things aren't going so bad, if you ask me.
Right.
And then when you got that job, how long were you there writing for?
3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
Right.
2011 to 2014.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's funny because when I got that second interview, I was much more. I was older at that point, and I was just like, if it works out, great. And if it doesn't, I didn't have all my hopes and dreams wrapped up into it.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I don't want to go into too many details about, numbers and stuff like that. But that interview, I just felt like I really nailed it even more than I did the first one. I'm like, they're going to offer. I just was really sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so they did. I got the call, and the human resources guy, the recruiting guy, said, we want to offer you the job, and here's what we're going to offer you. And they gave me a figure. I said, okay, well, let me talk to my wife, and I'll get back to you. And it wasn't insulting, but it wasn't enough to get me, again, to now I've been at the Baltimore Sun, how many ever years it's been, do the math, but, and now I'm in management at the Baltimore Sun. I'm a middle manager, and I'm making a good salary, and I've got a family now, and I'm like, I'm not leaving unless it's more than that. So I was perfectly comfortable, and I told him, after I talked to my wife, and I said, I'm going to have to, man, I really appreciate it, but I'm going to decline. Mm-hmm. And I think he was taken aback because I don't think they hear no a lot.
Probably not.
Right.
So he's like, oh, okay, can I ask why? And I told him why. I said, money wasn't quite what I thought it would be, and, there's certain factors in my life. I have family here, and I have an elderly mother here who's, a lot of things.
Yeah.
Okay. So a couple hours go by. He calls me again. He's like, hey, Stephanie McMahon would like to speak with you directly. He goes, I know you've made up your mind and everything. He's like, but she just wants to reach out to you. He's like, are you open to talking to her? Of course. Sure. Yeah. He goes, okay, she'll give you a call in a little bit. And so then Stephanie McMahon calls me. And she's like, I totally understand your concerns and everything. She's like, but we'd really like to have you here. And she gives me this open-ended question. She's like, what would make you happy? What would it take to get you here? Give me, come up with a number. I'm like, is this for real? My head's spinning, right? I'm like, okay. So she's like, yeah, call us back and tomorrow. And okay. So again, talk it over with my wife. And I said, all right, I'm not good at negotiating. I hate buying a car. I don't just tell me how much it costs and give it to me. You know what I mean? I hate haggling. So I've never negotiated before, but I'm like, all right, I'm going to just I'm going to put a big number out there. But I'll take this number from what they offered me and what I'm coming back with. If they can come in the middle, I'll take it. I'm going to say, I'm prepared, I'll say yes.
Right.
So I talk to her, I give her my number, here's my number, and I was shaking as I told, because I thought she's going to be like, who the hell do you think you are?
That's called the big ask,
Is that the big ask?
The big ask.
So I'm like,
a number higher to ultimately get to something else.
I'm thinking she's going to be like, who do you think you are? Right? But she's like, okay. She's like, we'll get back to you tomorrow or whenever. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the next day, Human Resources calls me again and says we want to offer you the contract or offer you the job. And it was the number that I asked for.
Wow.
So I was like, well, I'll take it. So
yeah,
I took it. Yeah. So it was like, man, I was on top of the world at that point. But I went into there with my eyes open because I know there aren't a lot of lifers there on the writing team. I know there's a lot of
turnover.
Of course, I went in there thinking I'm going to be one of the exceptions and I'm going to stay there, forever and all that. But, I lasted 3 years, which I saw people come in. I saw people that didn't last 3 weeks.
Wow.
I saw people that didn't last 3 days.
And there's millions of people around the world that have the same dreams you did, and don't get 3 minutes for the WWE. So, and ultimately, then by that point, me and you had started to become closer, because actually when you moved up, I'm a real estate agent. We talked about selling your house and all that, like before you moved up there. So we had gotten to the point where we had started to become better friends, and you leave your job at the WWE. You're not working there anymore, and we have a conversation, and we kind of turn this, come in with the idea to turn this into a character on our shows, and you go all in, like all in with coming out with a WWE sweatshirt on, and it was public knowledge that you were released at the time from WWE. So you come in, and I'm kind of letting you, as I always have with most people, I'm kind of giving you like free reign. Like, we're having discussions about it, but you're kind of, to give you your credit, kind of coming up with how you want to present and how you want to come back. And here we go. Now all of a sudden, Kevin Eck, former WWE writer, is about to become a character on the MCW shows.
I was looking to turn what was a negative into a positive, right? Because nobody likes to be told, we don't want you at your job anymore, right? It's an ego. It's a blow to your ego.
Sure.
Right? And even though it was, it's funny because this became an ongoing thing with the character, is I really was laid off due to budget cuts.
Right. Well, was that like an XFL? What happened at the time? There was something major.
It was a couple of things. It was the WWE Network didn't hit the
That's what it
subscriber
was.
number.
And that was big news, and they had a lot of cuts at that time.
They did.
Yeah.
They had basically.
I remember it being a big shift in something. That's what it was. They were way, way under on the number.
It was two things. It was that they basically told their stockholders, like, here's the target number, and then they didn't hit it. And also, they were renegotiating their TV deal at that point. And they thought they were going to get this huge TV deal, which they told the stockholders. And that didn't happen either. So those two things, the stock fell huge. And there were stories about Vince McMahon, like his personal wealth. He went from a billionaire to a millionaire.
I remember that, yeah.
And so, of course, what happens then? Well, then there's going to be a lot of layoffs, right? So, and we were told, like, they're going to be across all departments, right? And I was told by some people that had been there for a while, you know how we were talking about this big number that I asked for?
Right, I was just going to say, this is where the big ass comes back and kick you in the butt.
This is where the big ass bit me in the ass, right? Because it's like, some people told me, like, that knew, like, some of the people in the writing department who knew what people were making and stuff, they're like, usually the people that make the most money, when they start they're just going to look at numbers. They're going to take a spreadsheet.
It's all numbers.
It's all numbers. Doesn't care whose name is next to the number. That, just don't be surprised if you're on the list. So I wasn't. Like, I wasn't surprised at all. In fact, I kind of expected it. But still, when it happens, you have this,
still kicking in.
It's like, they don't want me anymore. They didn't say, hey, would you take a pay cut to stay? Like, they didn't even ask that. It's just, you're gone, and that's the end of it. So, yeah, I'm like, okay, how do I turn this into a negative into a positive? And I've always, I think probably all of us in this room, for sure, we all think, like, we have a little bit of ham in us, right? Like, we could be...
Oh, of course.
Right, it's like, I've always been behind the scenes. Yeah, I did a radio show, but, like... and when I did the blog, we did a little video show with the blog that Axel was part of. Axel and I would co-host. Yeah. But I'm like, you know what? I've always wanted to be a real part of the show. I've always wanted... And I've always loved heels. And I'm like, man, I think it would be so much fun. And I think I could really do it, is to be a heel. Heel manager. I'm not going to ever be a wrestler, that's for sure. But a heel manager, I think I could do. And so, yeah, I pitched you the idea. Former WWE writer, just got laid off. I'm bitter, and I think the character was basically that MCW is low rent, and MCW is just a little indie.
Us, right.
I've worked for the big promotion. I'm going to come in and show you guys how it's done. I'm going to make your little indie promotion, bring it up to standard. And that was the whole idea of it.
Yeah. And I remember, like, there's some times where like I can always say I was wrong or something. But I remember like a lot of the guys helping me book at the time. A lot of the guys, and I was like, you pitched it, and I was just like, I thought it was good. And I was like getting pushback from them. They're like, no, this is going to be cheesy. But it turned out it really worked. Like it just clicked. It worked. It worked with the fans. And I was, I'm glad that we went that direction. But it did. You came in and you made it work. A lot of guys thought, oh, that's just not going to get over. People are going to see through that. Mm-hmm. It's too like 80s heel or whatever. And I was just like, no, but I thought and was right. Like, I was like, he got a lot of the major wrestling websites picked it up when you got released. It was a writer. So like people know, and they did, man. It just took off right from the start. So originally it was just going to be a set where we were talking about we were going to do an interview segment, right? You were initially doing an interview segment.
The initial angle started off with me coming back like as a baby face.
Right.
Yeah, Al Albert hugged you. I just saw that.
That's right.
Al Albert hugged you.
Right.
Welcome, Kevin. Welcome.
Yeah, welcome back. I just, lost my job and hey, I'm back in MCW, back in Baltimore. Love everybody and, really put MCW over and the whole thing. And then at the end of the night, and the fans were very respectful because, I'm not really big parts, but I put over the whole hometown thing. Mm-hmm. I'm just like, I'm a big fan, just like you, and this, that, and the other. And then at the end of the night, that was just that was the misdirection.
Right.
And then at the end of the night, Matt Hardy was in a match with Trollop.
That's right.
For the
for the title.
For the
MCW title. Right.
And I came in. I had been doing some refereeing in MCW before that.
That's right. Oh my gosh!
So I had already been there as a referee.
Mm-hmm. I bought you out at a Shamrock Cup. I remember. That's right.
That's right.
That's amazing.
So at the end of the night, I've got and that was part of the story too. Was that I wanted to come back and be basically run the show. And you offered me a job as a referee.
And you got insulted.
And I got insulted.
See, there's no script here. We're just...
That's
right. Yeah.
We're all remembering it. That's right. It was you offered me a job as a lowly referee.
And you wanted to run the company.
I've been booking WrestleMania with Vince McMahon, and you want me to be a referee for your little indie promotion?
Right.
So at the end of the night, I came in. I think there was a ref bump. I come in with my ref shirt on and screwed Matt Hardy.
Screwed Matt
Hardy, gave him the nut shot, Drollocks pinned him, and then we were off to the races.
Yes. And then from that point, so from a promoter standpoint, after that, you started the Ecktourage, you start to kind of get people together, and we kind of, what happens a lot of times in booking and running and running the back, a lot of times, sometimes pieces automatically fit. Sometimes you have guys or girls that are good hands, that are good hands in the ring. You definitely want them. They have you like them. You like them on the shows, but they, like a puzzle, they haven't fit into the right spot. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, we get kind of what together was going to be a throw together team. We ultimately ended up Eric Chappell and Dirty Money, who were both talented guys. They were both in shape. They looked good, but we didn't have anything for them. And you eventually pull them together as the Ecktourage. And from a promoter standpoint, I have to give hats off because it was something at the time that was just kind of throw together. And they were to highlight you, and you were getting heat as a manager doing the shtick you were doing. But ultimately, you guys probably, I think, arguably became one of the best units and best tag team we've ever had in MCW. You guys, together, you got it over.
Yeah.
The Ecktourage got over, multiple time tag team champions.
3 times.
In MCW.
Who's counting?
Right. And that's something I want to point out as a promoter from the backstage side. That not that anything's meant to happen. Sometimes things are meant to happen. Sometimes they're not. But that wasn't put in place to become the unit that it was. That ultimately we not only a 3-time MCW Tag Team Champions, but you guys were in 2 really important moments in MCW history. Probably 2 of the top moments. One of them was in the tag team title match with the Hardys when they were Impact Wrestling, when they were white hot, and we had, over 1,000 people in the MCW arena. They were,
You're welcome for the house.
and they were going around. It was right before they went back at WrestleMania, and they were TNA Tag Team Champions, and they won the MCW Tag Titles. That moment, and also the very last Piper's Pit with Roddy Piper, the very last Piper's Pit that was ever done was done in the MCW arena with you guys involved. So they, you became, the Ecktourage became a big part of MCW history, and had a lot of very important roles.
Well, I just got to say, I really appreciate, and I've told you before, that you gave me the shot to do it.
Right.
You put the trust in me, and this is the first I've heard that there was pushback. I'd like a list of names, by the way. You said that, but yeah, I appreciate you giving us that platform, to do it. And Dirty and Eric and I were three individuals. We didn't know each other. I think Dirty and Eric may have known each other a little bit, through being on the Indies. They may have crossed paths. But I didn't know, either one of them, and we were just kind of thrown together. But we immediately just started brainstorming, like, what can we do with this? How can we make it different, than what, like, we didn't want it to just be typical. Like, what can we do different other than just, we're the heel team? Really, this whole WWE thing, former WWE writer, kind of played, into it a lot. But the thing was, like, people talk about chemistry, like, the three of us just had it. And it's like we all worked well together. We were all open to each other's ideas. And we all liked each other. Like, that was a big part of it, was the three of us we just gelled and bonded. So, I mean, it was a great time. Like, I had so much fun doing it. And to see it to have those opportunities, to be in the ring with Roddy Piper, I mean, to share a microphone with Roddy Piper. Like, you have no idea how much I idolized Roddy Piper when I was a teenager. Like, I was such a nerd when I was in high school. I had, how kids in high school, you'll put like bands' names on the front of it, I cut out a picture of Roddy Piper in his kilt from a wrestling magazine. He was on the cover, and like glued it to my my binder. Now, walking around, the halls of Dundalk High School, that didn't get over with the girl. I mean, like, the chicks didn't.
Yeah, it didn't get over with the girl.
It didn't get over with the chicks, but it's like I didn't care. I loved Roddy Piper.
Yeah, Kevin, I didn't care either when they
Neither did
that
I.
was one of the highlights of my experience here at MCW was that night, because I was at ringside as well for that. And I remember I'd grown up watching Roddy Piper, of course, too. And he was such a cool guy that night as well. But I remember at ringside, he leans over to me, he goes, "I'm going to kiss you now." And he just planted a big kiss on my cheek. And I was like, "Oh my God, Roddy Piper just kissed me." But like, that was one of my most favorite memories here at MCW too, was that night, and hearing you guys talking in the ring to get it was one of the best segments ever.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but it was so I got to work with Roddy in WWE, right? He came in. It was one of those cyber nights. I don't remember what we called it.
Cyber Tuesday.
Cyber Tuesday. Thank you.
I remember a lot of the stuff that we're talking about right now. It's coming back.
So I was the writer assigned to this segment, which was a Piper's Pit, but we didn't know who the guest was going to be. It was, fans could vote. It was either going to be Chris Jericho, Dolph Ziggler, or The Miz. And these things were a shoot. Like, it was legit, like, it wasn't worked. So, as the writer on the segment, I was told...
Like, it was really picked by the people.
Those things were really picked by the people. Vince would not work them. 100%. He's like, it's got to be legit. So, I was told at the show, this is not done ahead of time. This is, the day of the show. I have to write 3 separate Piper's Pit segments. One for Jericho, one for Dolph, one for Miz. Now, eventually, all 3 of them were, in every scenario, all 3 of them eventually come out. But how you started it and what, Jericho starts one. Well, he and Piper have to have an interaction. That's one segment, and then who comes out next and how do they get into it? Okay. Then, for the Dolph angle or for the Dolph, what does he do? And so I had to write 3 separate segments because we didn't know which one was going to happen. And I remember a lot of times with talent at that level, this is not handing a promo to a mid-card talent and you say, memorize this, and that's the end of it. There's no back and forth. With these talents, especially Piper and Jericho and Miz, Dolph didn't have as much, but they all had their own opinions, especially Jericho, of how this segment's going to, I hand them the paper and they're like, okay. all right, so now let's talk about how we're going to do this. And so now, we're debating back and forth, and I was like, oh my, this is going to blow up. And I got to write 3 separate versions. And, the clock's ticking. Like, we're on live at 8 o'clock. And, I don't know, it's 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. This isn't. And I could tell Roddy was, like, his head was just swimming with all these different scenarios. Of, like, so he's trying to get it all in his head. And Roddy's big with ad-libbing anyway.
And
right?
old school guys like that, they're not used to that.
Exactly.
Because he spent 30 years
100%
ad-libbing.
Yep.
Right.
So I'm just thinking, my God, it's going to... And a lot of times when these things go bad, the writer is the one who gets yelled at. It's not the talent, right? So I'm like, this could be the night I get fired. So, and then Vince was making changes up until like 5 or 10 minutes before the segment. He's like, tell Piper he's got to say this now. I said, oh, God. I gave it to Roddy. And I just saw this look on his face. I'm like, this is just going to be a disaster, right? So they go out and do the segment. Jericho won the vote, so Jericho goes first. So that's the scenario we do. And they're out there. And I'm in Gorilla. Writers have to be in Gorilla with the headsets on, communicating. Vince is to your left. Kevin Dunn's in the truck. And you got to kind of communicate. You have to sort of tell them where we're going. So Kevin knows what shots to get and this and that. That's great when everybody follows the script. Roddy's out there, and he immediately starts going off the script. Jericho's off the script, and, you got to know when to cue somebody. When do you send Dolph, and when do you send Miz, and they're all over the place. And it was just a train wreck. And Vince starts feeding, luckily Vince wasn't angry as much as he got a kick out of it. He started feeding, if you ever go back and watch that clip, he starts feeding Michael Cole lines to say how horrible the segment is. So Cole starts cracking, this is the worst Piper's Pit ever. So that was that segment, right? It was just a disaster. So that's what we based the Piper's Pit in MCW off of, was Roddy and I had this. The setup was, I knew Roddy was going to be at the MCW show for Piper's Pit. I demanded an audience with him because I wanted him, I basically blamed him. This was the downward spiral of my time in WWE. Vince never forgave me for that segment, so when there were budget cuts, when there were budget cuts, I was the first guy to go, and it all goes back to this segment, and I blame you, Roddy Piper, and, I said, I had a line of they say never meet your heroes because they'll always disappoint you. You were my hero, you disappointed me, I just want you to say you're sorry.
Right.
That was the setup.
Yeah, and I specifically remember, because this is something I always got a kick out of as a promoter and still do, like when I say my kids, people that I've broke in and trained, and when I give them opportunities or would give them opportunities with stars like that, I'd always get a kick out of just kind of watching their body language before and after, and usually, and I just remember all of you guys, like you, Eric, Dirty, everybody, even the Hellcats, because they ran out, everybody, just when they came back, it was like every one of you guys was like 8-year-old kids just on cloud 9 that holy crap, we just did a Piper's Pit. And then ultimately at that point in time, you didn't know. I remember having a conversation with Eric, Dirty, everybody, going back and forth afterwards, because ultimately we didn't know that, 10 days later?
11
days later, he passed away.
Right.
So ultimately, you had no idea that was going to be the last Piper's Pit ever, ever done.
And imagine that, again, I'm that 18, 17-year-old kid with Roddy Piper on his notebook. Now I'm the last guest ever in Piper's Pit. I mean, that's still just even saying it.
Yeah.
It just blows me away. And Roddy was so great to work with. It was another one of those things where he was doing meet and greets and signing autographs, right, taking pictures and everything. And obviously, not surprisingly, he had a long line, and he was out there longer than I think we thought he was going to be. So, and I'm real nervous with stuff not just working with Pike, with anybody. I like to prepare. I really want to know what I'm doing before I got there. I'm not that great on the fly. And so here comes, Roddy and I hadn't really talked. All he said to me early in the night was, "Hey, I hear we're doing this thing about, you're a WWE writer and about that segment we did back then, and okay, I'll get with you later." It was 15 minutes, I think, before we went out there. Right? You were in the back.
We were in the office, weren't we?
Yes.
We were all
in the office.
We were in the office, yep. Well, and Piper had been at another autograph signing earlier in the day that ran long because he talked to every single fan and not just, hey, how you doing? Had whole conversations with them. He was up in Hagerstown and came straight to here. So he got here, and like you said, his line was, really long, and he just took so much time with everybody. And then, it was 15 minutes before the segment, and we were all in the office.
It was 15 minutes, and I'm like, I like stuff script. Like, I like to write my stuff out, kind of memorize it. Roddy and I were just going, he's like, yeah, well, you say this, and then I'll say that, and, we'll figure it out. And I'm like, oh my God.
And he's talking about other stuff in between.
Like
he's going off on tangents.
And I'm like, I'm going out there with Roddy Piper. Oh my God. Like, I was nervous, but it's like, I know you guys might feel the same way, but it's like you're nervous, but man, as soon as you walk out on that stage,
it goes away.
It goes away, and I'm like, man, this is going to be so cool. Like, I'm walking into the ring, and there's Roddy Piper standing there with the microphone. This is going to be awesome. And like he immediately kind of took it off in a little bit different direction, but I'm like, and again, I don't think of myself as being able to think great on my feet, but that was like, you had no choice. Mm-hmm. And I felt, at least, I'm my own worst critic. Like, I'll criticize my performances all the time, but I thought that night I was as good as I could possibly be, and trying to keep up with Roddy.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I was so happy. Like, you go back and watch and you're like, well, I could have said this or said that, could have been better. But just for somebody who had to like ad lib with Roddy, like, we knew where we were going, but he took us in a different way to get there. Like, I was just so happy with it.
Yeah, and that was also, that night was like, for me as a promoter, like really proud moment for me. I have these moments that I remember of people saying something to me, and the fans, people watching should know, like, Roddy Piper, then, who was paid, he had done his shtick, he had done his autograph signing, could have left. 99.9% of your big stars are gone at that point. Some of them do the autograph signing, and if they're doing a promo or whatever, they're like, hey, let me get that out of the way first match and get out of here. He stayed the whole night and watched pretty much everybody's match, guys and girls, pulled them aside and just literally sat and watched their matches at the curtain. As soon as they walked through the curtain, hey, do you mind if I have I just remember people's faces all night. Hey guys, do you have a minute? Can I give you some advice? And everybody was like, yes. Just like, are you serious? Like, Roddy Piper.
You want to talk to me?
Yeah, and I said to him, and I thanked him for that.
Mm-hmm.
And he, like, I went to walk away, and he grabbed me by the arm, and I was like, and he, like, pulls me back, and he said, you have such an amazing product and a platform for young people in this business. He's like, and I go over and see all these indies all over the country. He's like, he goes, if I lived here, if I lived close, I'd come to every one of your shows and stand here at the curtain and do this for all your matches. I think it's great what you do, and you have an amazing platform to help people's careers, and I'm just so impressed with what you got. And I was like, oh my God. You know what I mean? Like, well, yeah. So, yeah. And I was just like blown away, and I was just like, wow.
And he was going to come back, correct? He was going to come back. So, our next show was October, right?
No, he was doing a signing in Hunt Valley for a horror convention.
That's right.
And we had shows that weekend, and the conversation came back, and he said, I want to come back. Basically, you'll be next to nothing. I really like being here. And he was like, if you want, I can be a surprise. So we were supposed to talk in the next couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. He's like, let me get the schedule from like Chiller Theater. I can't remember. It's a big horror convention. He was already booked, and we had shows, I think, that weekend, like in Waldorf. Yeah. We had like 2 or 3 shows, but he wanted to come. But he needed to get his signing schedule for the convention, and I was like, you want to? And he's like, yeah, I want to come back. I want to come to your shows. I just need to figure out what our signing schedule is going to be and where you're going to be at, and we'll get all those details together. Call me in a couple weeks. This was July. Mm-hmm. The convention was in October, so we had like 2 months. Yeah. And then sadly 11 days later.
Yeah.
It's that's part of the kind of story that is our industry. And speaking of that kind of thing, you mentioned that you didn't even know Eric and Dirty Money before you guys were all put together. And through that being put together and creating here at MCW Pro, you became great friends.
We did, yeah. We're 3 different, like, very different personalities, too. But somehow we made it work. And they did list, like, we all pitched in our ideas, but I will say this, that they did sort of respect that it was, I don't want to say my vision, but I had very specific ideas of things I thought we should do. And, we'd have a conversation about it, but ultimately I think they trusted me.
Mm-hmm.
We had a match against Bo Nakota and the Appalachian Outlaws.
Mm-hmm.
Hoss.
Yeah, it was.
We had a couple. Well, there was
We
a
had a
couple
couple
different
versions.
There were a
versions.
couple
There was
others,
a
yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was in and out a lot of your time here, so.
Right. So we had a match coming up. We were heels and they were heels, and they had JP as Callahan as their manager. And I was like, heels versus heels. Like, what can we do to make this? I was thinking, like, go back to my WWE days of we got to make it entertaining. And so I thought, well, we'll be more of the heels. They can be subtle baby faces or whatever. And we were going to come out and do a parody, like you'd see on Raw or SmackDown, where, I put on a cowboy hat and tobacco and and we came out and did this thing, like this parody. And Dirty and Eric were not completely sold on this idea, and I was just like, just trust me, like it'll be good. And Eric, was, I play guitar a little bit. Great, I'm gonna mess up the lyrics or change the lyrics to Sweet Home Alabama, and it'll be, and you play it on the guitar, and Dirty, like we'll figure out something for you to do, and that's what we did. And so like on things like that, they trusted me, and we did a thing when we faced the Hardys. Before that, we shot a video. I came up with like our version of the Broken Hardys, where we imitated. It was another parody where I was Matt Hardy and Eric was Jeff Hardy, and we made Dirty be Senor Benjamin, right? And we did this parody of the Broken Hardys, and like a lot of people still like people have told me they see that and thought it was entertaining and all that. So they trusted me on those kind of things. I think they were more like I don't know. They were more traditional. And I was like, just trust me, let's just do it. And they always did.
Yeah, that camaraderie and that trust translated whenever I would come back. I remember I could gauge how big you guys got when I saw the reaction. As guest ring announcer sometimes, I'd see the way that they hated you.
They did.
And but from that kind of hate that the fans had for you, it seemed there was a lot of love between the three of you. And that leads me to my next question is we lost Eric Chappell here in the MCW family. And I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit to your relationship with him in particular and what he meant to you.
Sure. As I said, all three of us were close, but I would say that Eric and I were probably a little closer because we enjoyed doing a lot of the same things. He and his family loved going to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and we loved that too, me and my family, so we would go together. Him and his 3 kids and his wife and my 2 kids, we would do stuff like that. And it really did become, there were, in the beginning, it's all just like talking about work, like the next show and the next angle and, what can we do down the line? And then after a while, the conversations were like about anything but wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
It was about his family or mine or, we talk politics or whatever, we talk about the Ravens and the Orioles. And so we went from, guys who work together, that kind of like each other, to like legitimate friends. Like he was a very good friend of mine. And I knew Eric had, he battled depression, and I know there were times when he was really down. And, we would have conversations about that. So when Eric did pass away, obviously it's a shock. But once you get past the initial shock, you're like, I'm not that shocked because I know what he was battling for all those years. So, yeah.
And for the sake of everybody kind of being comfortable here to get the obstacle out of the room, I knew we were probably going to talk about Eric, so I reached out to his wife. And she's okay with us having this discussion because I don't know if it's ever been talked about publicly, from a wrestling standpoint. But Eric committed suicide and left behind a wife and
3 kids.
3 kids. So it's something that, to me, too, I remember because kind of taking me back. Like, you actually made the call to me.
Yeah.
And it's one of the, like I remember I was on a real estate appointment and had to pull over in a parking lot. And me and you were telling me, and just was someone like RJ who was ill and was, for a while, this is something that comes completely out of left field. And at that point, him and his family had moved up closer to you and your family. So you were kind of really close to him on a personal sense.
Yeah,
when all that happened.
that was huge. He had lived down near Delaware, and then he had moved up close to where we are in Pennsylvania, and he was closer. That was another thing we were excited about. Like we would do these get-togethers, meet in Gettysburg. When he didn't live close, we would still make these trips to see each other. And now he was going to be, much closer, which we figured we'll see a lot more of each other. I had just, I think he died on Monday. On Friday before that, I actually was at his new place helping him move.
I remember you had said something about that. Mm-hmm.
So here it is Friday. I'm helping him move, and man, it's a new start. It's a fresh beginning. It's a new house. They live in a new place, and it seemed like there was so much optimism. So that was really 2-3 days later. I guess it might have happened Sunday night. He was found Monday morning. It's like, man, that. Then you start thinking of should I have seen?
Right.
I was just with him 48 hours. Should I have seen something?
And me and you had a lot of those discussions.
We did.
I know that was weighing heavy on you and something you were personally battling with.
Yeah, it's should I have seen something? Was he saying? Was there a cry for help that I didn't see? Could I have said something? Just a lot of guilt comes in at that point. What could I have done? But again, I knew Eric had depression issues. So I don't think anybody should be what I've learned in talking to people too is you can't beat yourself up over it. Whether it's me or whether it's a friend or a family member, ultimately nobody's in his own head except him.
Yeah.
And to this day, I don't know. I don't think anybody knows I don't know what happened between Friday night and Sunday night. I don't think anybody knows.
Mm-hmm.
What was it that pushed him over the edge?
Right.
Yeah, it's always the wondering of what could I have done, what could I have said. But it's almost like nowadays we can be a little bit more prepared, and we can be a little bit more prepared just by addressing mental wellness.
Yeah, we spoke about this last week with Leo's exit from the challenge.
Yeah.
And that's something we don't talk about, but we should talk about. And so I'm glad that we're able to sit in a place and talk about it and share and support.
Yeah, and with that said, I think that at this time we as an entire MCW Pro family would like to take a very special pause, and we have a message for anyone out there right now that feels that they're struggling and they don't have anyone to talk to.
Suicide is a preventable health problem and a leading cause of death in the United States. On average, in 2020, 132 Americans died from suicide each day. A total of 48,344 lives were lost, and 1.4 million Americans attempted to end their own lives. Of those lives lost, 90% had a diagnosable mental health condition at the time of their death. Nearly 1 in 12 adults report having depression, with women twice as likely to be affected as men. Help is available. If you or a loved one is in need, call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline 24 hours a day at 800-273-8255 or visit suicidepreventionlifeline.org. We hope you're enjoying this week's episode of the MCW Cast. At MCW Pro Wrestling, much like many small businesses throughout the country, the pandemic has presented many challenges. For a company like ours that hosts events with live audiences, the impact has been even more severe, and all of our forms of revenue have been cut off. In order to continue to engage with our fans on a regular basis, we made the decision to begin to produce the MCW Cast and are providing it for absolutely no cost on Facebook Live, Twitch, YouTube, and SoundCloud. If you'd like to support us during these challenging times, you can do so in several ways. The most popular way is to buy us a coffee to help fuel the cast. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/MCWcast, and for just $3, you can buy the cast a coffee Or you can choose to become a member of the cast for just $5 a month and receive several special perks. That's buymeacoffee.com/MCWcast. You can also contribute directly on Cash App, MCW Wrestling, or on Venmo, MCW-Wrestling. You can also show your support for the MCW cast while sporting some great gear by going to teespring.com/stores/MCWcast to pick up a full line of official MCW cast merchandise, from coffee mugs and face coverings to t-shirts and sweatshirts. Also, don't forget to comment in the threads on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch to get your questions answered on a future episode. And you can also send us a tweet using the hashtag AskMCWcast. Thank you for your support, and now, back to the show.
All right, and we're back. With that, Kevin, want to get into, after all that, come back working for us. You ended up now where you are now, which is working for Ring of Honor, such a well-rounded, all the major companies and all the things you've done in wrestling. Now you're, working behind the scenes with Ring of Honor.
Yeah, and I'm really happy. I don't like to talk bad about any place I've worked or anything like that, but it's a different experience, obviously, than what I had in WWE. WWE, it was very cutthroat. You hear about like cutthroat in the locker room, but like it was cutthroat in the writers' room, and everybody looking to get their stuff in, and Ring of Honor, man, it's just night and day compared to that. It's such a cool. And you've been in Ring of Honor, the locker room is amazing. The talent, the level of talent there is amazing. Like I'll put the roster up against any roster, just from a strictly talent standpoint. But then the camaraderie, and I know like people don't think it's real or whatever like that, but it's like when you hear like, oh, it's a family. This is the first time I've ever really seen something like that it's not hyperbole. It's not, it's, like it really is. Like everybody is on Team ROH. And what can we do to make the show better? And we want you to succeed and you to succeed. And if you succeed, I succeed. And that's what it is. And I just love being a part of it. Like it's a smaller company, obviously. So I feel like somebody like I can make more of a difference there. Right. Whether it's pitching an idea, like a creative idea, or writing for the website or doing the podcast. Like you can do as much as you want to do, like, and you take ownership of it, and they trust you to do it.
Yeah, and when you have passion about something, the way we're all passionate about professional wrestling, obviously you need money to make a living, but it really is, the money isn't everything. The money isn't everything. And like you said, making a difference, that's where, for me, I'm so comfortable in my skin. I mean, I have people outside of wrestling that, hey, Dan, have you ever wished like you'd go work for WWE? Like, no, that, like, for me, where I'm at, what I always say is where my rung on the ladder is, when I look at all the people that I've helped come up that ladder and get to stardom, like that's where my spot is. And I have there's a level of satisfaction that I get just being that rung on the ladder to help people up. So I know exactly what you mean, like making a difference and actually feeling like you have major contribution and you're not just like someone there taking a paycheck.
Exactly. And you mentioned the money thing. And it's like, I know we talked about money earlier with the WWE job. Obviously I'm not making as much money in Ring of Honor, but just I'm so much happier there. And just from a morale standpoint. And like, you hear the stories in WWE, walking on eggshells and, what's the old man, what's, his mood going to be like today, and who's going to get yelled at for what crazy reason. And like you live that for 3 years, and then once you don't live it anymore, you're like, man, I'm glad that's not part of my life anymore.
Absolutely, Kevin. I can empathize. I felt like I was walking on eggshells as an extra.
Right.
And I mean, I wasn't even hired. I was just there, getting an opportunity, but still I wanted to, walk, make sure that I'm not showing the door here quickly, so I'm with that.
And so you can't put a price on that, right? Like we all want to make as much money as we can to help our, support our families and all that stuff. But like you can make enough money, but if you have a great work environment and all, like it's worth more to you in the long run just for your overall happiness and quality of life than if you're making, double that or triple, whatever, you know what I mean? So that's where I'm at. Like I love working for Ring of Honor. I was worried there for a few months when we were on hiatus because we weren't doing shows because of the pandemic. We had shut down completely, and not nervous in the sense that I thought I was going to lose my job or anything, because Ring of Honor, they basically said from day one, no one's losing their job in this. You know, other companies laid people off. You know,
WWE was the first ones.
Exactly. Ring of Honor said
lots of layoffs.
Ring of Honor said we're going to continue to pay every employee in the office, every independent contractor, every talent, and you know, including people that were like Joe Hendry, who's sitting over in Scotland, who hasn't been able to travel.
Wow.
He hasn't wrestled on a Ring of Honor show since February, almost a year. He hasn't missed a paycheck.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So
That's
I can't say enough about Ring of Honor
And
and how
you
much I
give
love
props
the
to their you know, Sinclair Broadcasting, who owns you know, Ring of Honor, and luckily they're in the position to do that, which is great for Sinclair.
And the other thing is
kinda take care of
when we decided to start doing shows again, we didn't do any shows for 5 months, 6 months, and Joe Koff, you know, COO of Ring of Honor, was very clear, like, we're not going to do this again until we can do it safely. So Ring of Honor worked with the Maryland State Athletic Commission, came up with these very, 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 it's 3 varies, stringent protocols where talent and everybody that's going to be at the show has to be tested like 3 times before they come in there. Everybody, you know, you have to wear a mask when you're backstage.
And you have to be in a bubble.
You have
In
to
a
be
bubble.
in, that's what I was getting to, you have to be sequestered basically. You're in a bubble in your hotel room for 5 days. Like, that's the length that they've gone to just so we can do these shows. So,
And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what I wanted you to talk about. Like last week, because I get messages and people on Facebook like, how come Ring of Honor is taping for television like in Maryland, but MCW isn't doing shows? And I kind of tried to break it down last week and explain from a financial standpoint for you guys who have national television, you know, television stations. How many stations does Ring of Honor air on?
yeah, I don't know the exact number, but yeah, the
It's
stations
a lot. All over
markets,
the country.
markets
Over
all
100 stations.
Yeah, markets all over the country.
All over the country, like, you needed that content. We don't. We're an independent promotion. We don't have national television. The extensive, the amount of what you guys do, what Ring of Honor does, is really amazing. And so it's just not in our budget. It doesn't make financial sense. But for you guys, it's, you know, like Larry was saying, it's a bubble. Like, basically a hotel's rented out, you know, after they do their 2-week testing, right? Then they come in, they do 3. Then they're in like a bubble in a hotel for 3 days.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like 5
and
days.
then tested the day of.
Tested again the day of.
Day of taping.
And the ring crew changes the mat and everything after every match.
You're right.
Yeah. So it really is. It's unbelievable. I don't think any other company is doing anything like that.
No.
As far as I know.
I can certainly tell you at that 24-hour telethon, they weren't changing the canvas during the different competitors fighting, but you know, it is what it is. Yeah, absolutely, Dan. You know, you hit the nail on the head. The cost, the tremendous cost during this day and age to make
The
this
Athletic
happen.
Commission, tens of thousands of dollars for every taping. Tens of thousands of dollars for Ring of Honor they spend in order to keep their talent and to go over, and they're not just following, say, CDC guidelines and protocol, they're going above and beyond, you know.
They
So,
set the standard, right?
yeah, they definitely do.
A hell of a company to work for, and you know, that leads me to something that I want to call out right now. Of course, like you mentioned, Kevin, I was a member of the ROH management team and a performer for Ring of Honor. That time has passed, but it really just warmed me to the core that Ring of Honor, when we recently here in the MCW Pro family lost, you know, our core, when they acknowledged the passing of R.J. Myers, the Bruiser, our friend. They didn't have to do that. I really can't talk about it too much, but, you know, I just want to call, you know, entire Sinclair broadcast group and Ring of Honor management for just doing the right thing by someone that was so instrumental to Maryland wrestling.
Yeah, and they gave RJ that like national attention.
Absolutely, yeah.
And they did it multiple times, even through not just acknowledging it through the website and when he passed, but
Twitter.
And Twitter, but also you know, a lot of our guys there. We have a great relationship with ROH, the Soldiers of Savagery, and Dante Caballero, Ken Dixon, and Joe Keys. And Joe Keys is getting a little push on television, and you know, they acknowledged RJ's passing, and he did a really emotional promo that was, oh, excuse me, a little tough to watch.
Yeah.
Well, he was choked up
watch
during
it.
the
He
promo.
was
He
choked
was
up.
really
Yes.
choked up. You
So-
can see how much he meant to him.
When RJ passed, I did reach out to the people at Ring of Honor and just said, because I didn't know what the answer was going to be, because he wasn't really a part of Ring of Honor, but I said, would it be appropriate if we could write up, whenever a wrestler passes away, even if they're not really in Ring of Honor, but they've reached a certain standing in the business,
Sure.
you do the courtesy of, we mourn the passing of. And I said, would it be appropriate to do something like this, for RJ, because MCW is an affiliate of Ring of Honor. He's trained some guys that are here. And the answer was absolutely. Yeah, go
Right.
ahead, write it up. And so I did. I wrote it, and we put it on there. I host the ROH podcast, ROH Strong podcast, and we had Soldiers of Savagery on there, and we did a segment where we talked about, what RJ meant to them, and how much he helped them get to where they are in Ring of Honor. And yeah, you mentioned again, Joe Keys talked about him before his match with Jonathan Gresham. So certainly, RJ was never in Ring of Honor, but his presence is certainly being felt in Ring of Honor and will be felt in Ring of Honor for years to come.
Right.
That's an amazing thing for us to know, for us to feel as more and more of RJ's kids, your kids, Dan,
My grandkids.
your grandkids, right? Our nieces and nephews, Tara,
Our actual kids appreciate it. It's they're not ready for all of this yet, but one day they're going to come back and be like, holy crap, my dad did all this stuff, so I thank you for that. And,
Yeah, that's
it'll be there
it's
for
a
them.
permanent
Mhm.
kind of legacy put out there online that your kids, Tara, will be able to look back on and really appreciate it years down, and even show their kids, pull it up on the internet and all the stuff that was written about him, and videos and fans' comments, something they'll be able to look back, years from now and be able to see. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? That leads us right into every single week. One of my favorite parts of the MCW cast is when Phil Stamper, general manager of MCW Pro, fills us in.
Right.
So with that said, let's kick it to the Indie Roundup. I want to hear more about the big 24-hour telethon. I know our fans do. Leo Rush is showing in that. So let's go ahead and kick it on over to Phil so he can fill us in.
Hey everyone, my name is Phil Stamper, and it's time again for the Independent Wrestling Roundup. Have plenty of news about action coming your way. Now, some things I've shared with you before about independent wrestling companies doing different ways to film footage, to put out brand new content. One of the ways they're doing that is through the variety of different streaming opportunities that are out there. Now, one of the ways that exists is through a company called IWTV. You can check them out at iwtv.live or independentwrestling.tv. They even have their own app, IWTV. And this week, they have brand new episodes already in the can for you from Interspecies Wrestling out of Canada, Flophouse in Indiana, New South Action Clash in Alabama, Heavy Metal Wrestling out of Texas. This Wednesday, brand new episode from Limitless's The Road out of Maine, C4 from Canada, and New Texas Pro Wrestling join them on Thursday. And then Sean Henderson's Weekend at Sean's this Friday and Saturday on IWTV, as well as on Sunday, Violence X Suffering out of New Jersey. So plenty of action over on IWTV. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Fight. So Fight.tv also showcases a number of promotions from around the world. Of course, New Japan footage is there. We've all seen Impact Wrestling's pay-per-views are also featured through Fight. This week, they have a brand new episode of WrestleBration. It's a celebration of independent British wrestling. They have a brand new episode this Wednesday. And then Devotion Championship Wrestling on Thursday, a brand new episode. And now many of these episodes are being filmed without fans, so there's not going to be open door events. So please don't try to rush your way to New Jersey to go see Violence X Suffering on this Sunday, because it's a closed door venue event. So no fans allowed. It's just straight action coming your way through these different platforms. Now, plenty of other action is going to take place, and there will be fans at many of these events. So make sure if you're interested in any of them that you're visiting their sites before you go. Many of them have different kinds of restrictions that you need to comply with. For example, you have to wear masks. There's going to be physical distancing, that you have to order your tickets in advance. It just depends a little bit on what some of their jurisdictions are doing. For the most part, many of them are complying with these kinds of rules and regulations. Now, I also advocate before you go to check out their websites. The reason for that is sometimes as jurisdictions change course and go, well, we can't have your event, that they might have to unfortunately postpone last second. So please, 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 before you go, check out these events, their event websites. So this coming Thursday, WWA4 out of Atlanta, Georgia, United Wrestling Oklahoma and Oklahoma City, 127 Pro Wrestling with their weekly event this Thursday in Grimesley, Tennessee. Then on Friday, we have Pro South Wrestling in Alabama, Pro Wrestling All-Stars of Detroit in Brownstone, Michigan. It's right outside Detroit. Trust me, it's Pro Wrestling All-Stars of Detroit. It's right next door. I already mentioned Weekend at Sean's Hardcore Hustle organization is providing that. That is this Friday. Unified Wrestling Oklahoma returns again for action on Friday in Oklahoma City. Resolute Wrestling in Tennessee. Texoma Pro Wrestling out of Sherman, Texas, all action this Friday. Then on Saturday, we have action from Victory Championship Wrestling in Alabama, Revolutionary Wrestling Entertainment in Arkansas. WWN presents American Combat Wrestling, ACW, out of Port Richey, Florida. Renegade Championship Wrestling in Georgia. Georgia World Class Wrestling in Cornelia, Georgia. Elevate Pro Wrestling in, it looks like that just left the side of my screen. Perkinston, Mississippi. American Lucha Wrestling comes to Burlington, North Carolina. Uprise Pro Wrestling in Lincoln, North Carolina. Tennessee Wrestling Alliance out of Pikeville, Tennessee. Total Psychopathic Wrestling out of Maryville, Tennessee. Metroplex Wrestling out of Bedford, Tennessee. Mission Pro out of Buda, Tennessee. SWE Fury out of Irving, Texas. Superstar Pro Wrestling out of the United Kingdom. Still action coming out of the United Kingdom on a limited basis. No fans able to attend those events live. And then Frontline Pro out of Luxembourg, Wisconsin, also taking place this coming Saturday. And then on Sunday, we have School of Morton. Now, School of Morton is one of those companies, weekly event, also airing their events live on Facebook. So you can check them out at 5:05 p.m. every Sunday. School of Morton out of Chuckey, Tennessee. And then Premier Wrestling League Mid-Atlantic out of Bluefield, West Virginia, this coming Saturday. So lots of action for you to look forward to on the independents. I hope you get an opportunity to check out some of this footage. It's amazing to watch what people are able to put together and trying to push the envelope creatively while we're in our current situation. Of course, big snowstorm just hit the Mid-Atlantic region, but that didn't stop a lot of companies from being able to put together footage for you. So go make sure that you're checking them out. Check out all of these companies and their websites. I'm sure that they would appreciate some of your traffic if you go check them out. My name is Philip Stamper, and this has been this week's Independent Wrestling Roundup.
All right, thanks for that, Phil, for filling us in on the Indie Roundup. I know you enjoy that part there, Larry.
I like it when Phil fills us in.
So, and you know what, I just have to say, I think it's so great that we have Phil Stamper, not just as our general manager here at MCW, but that he stays on top of all of these things that can inform our fans and, you know, just wrestling fans in general, and that he really has got his thumb on the pulse of indie wrestling. And I think that's great that he's able to contribute that every week for us.
Yeah, like I said, even at a time like this where not every state's running, and it's kind of, you know, you don't know who's running, what promotion's running, you know. So, I personally love listening to Phil to kind of find out. He kind of lets me know who's opening up and who's getting closer to opening up and who's getting closer to doing shows again. So
yeah, he's like Colt Cabana's the ambassador of pro wrestling. Well, Phil's the vice president.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
His unofficial job title.
Indeed. All right. Well, yeah.
This kind of wraps it up, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yep.
Tara, did you want to talk about that new piece of fashion you got on there?
New fashion accessory.
I like it.
I have a new fashion accessory here. It's the MCW Cast official face mask. If you'd like to have one of your own or any of our other MCW Cast merchandise, you can, of course, check us out at teespring.com. Lots of different apparel accessories that you can order for yourself there. Just go to Teespring and search up MCW Cast, and it'll take you right there. And you can have one too.
That's right. And don't forget to ask us any burning questions that you have out there. I'm surprised we're at episode 3. I haven't gotten really one question just yet for Ask, #MCW Cast.
And I want to throw this out there, and I will completely put myself out. I just have gotten familiar with Twitter, so I've put it off for a long time. So I would like to interact and hear from some of our fans. So you can send me a direct question or you can just send one to the cast, but I will read all of them and we will reply to them. And I really want you to help me to learn how to use Twitter. So ask MCW Cast, hashtag ask MCW Cast, and we will respond to those next week.
And also we realize a lot of people just have their social media communication of choice, so to speak.
Sure, yeah.
Facebook gets a ton of activity. Obviously, a lot of people watch on Facebook, even though they can watch on Twitch and YouTube. So if you're not a Twitter person, you can also, we'll go through the threads of the video. If you post like
Hashtag,
below the stream right now, and or just post your questions if you want to, you can just post them in the comments section of the Facebook video. And we'll also read your questions, just because you may not be a Twitter person.
Right.
So if you want to post them, and hey, while you're there posting a question under the stream, make sure you share.
Oh yeah,
share the stream.
Share it, get the word out there. We've had 3 great guests, but you know, if you want to ask MCW Cast who are some of the next upcoming guests going to be, maybe we'll reveal some of our guests. You know?
Or if you have a suggestion for a guest that you would like to see featured here on the MCW Cast, we are open to suggestions and we want to deliver content that you want, so let us know.
That's a great call out, Tara.
And Kevin, thanks so much for coming in. I thought it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. There was a lot, you know, going through, you know, we've known each other 20-some years, and there was, you know, things I learned about you and things I had forgotten about that we brought up now. I thought it was a great conversation.
I agree. Thank you so much, Kevin, for joining us this week.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I got to talk about my favorite subject myself this week. So.
Who doesn't like to
come back anytime.
The consummate heel.
Yeah, right?
Well, what I loved hearing about this week in particular was that how so many things overlap in wrestling. You know, I mean, when we were sharing like the Kevin Dunn stories or the WWE stories as being extras, and you know, just how we're all connected and how we're all related, and we don't even realize sometimes how we overlap in this world.
Makes you think that our family's a lot bigger than just the 3 letters that kind of bind us. We're not just ROH. We're not just MCW Pro. We're one big whole community. The GCW community, the ICW community. It's family.
Right, absolutely.
And with that said, family, we'll see you next week for another exciting edition of the MCW Cast.
Watch hundreds of hours of MCW Pro Wrestling action at MCWRageTV.com. That's MCWRageTV.com.